Hi there, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to discuss a bug with a modern web browser control. This is something I've brought up in the past. I've demonstrated it's a consistently reproducible issue, and it's a pretty major bug in reality. The fact of the matter is that you can't reliably assign a control source to the modern web browser control in real time. Let me demonstrate, and then we'll look at the article. So I'm just going to open up a demo database from scratch. So nothing's running in the background. Nothing's going on here. Let's just start off with the basics. We have a form with a web browser control. And I just want to demonstrate here the way that the control source has been entered. So I'm going to just use the Zoom box for 2 seconds. And you'll see, we've simply assigned here HTTPS, we have the proper prefix and the file, okay? Now let's see what happens. We're not going to save any changes. Here we go. It won't load. Now this, to a certain extent, I guess, makes sense. Let's say. We're going to now move on to the second version. Now, this is only a small variation, and this is the way we see it typically. The same path, but now we're putting an equal sign with a quotation to encapsulate the path to the file. Not forgetting, once again, that prefix, okay, that all important HTTPS MS access prefix, okay? Now let's see what happens. It loads, okay? So just wanted to distinguish that for anyone that isn't clear on that. When you're going through the form, the property sheet, that equal in quotes is critical. We're going to get back to that in a second. There's a reason I've just mentioned all of this. Now to the bug itself, because that wasn't the bug. The bug itself is if we try to dynamically assign the record source, you will see that sometimes it works, but most of the time it will not. And normally it will only work the first time the form is opened. Here is an example. I'm hoping it will work today. And it loaded the web page, the blue. If we relaunch it now, it will not. And it will not repetitively. I can do this all day long. Okay. Normally, a compact and repair seems to resolve the issue, but not always. It didn't this time. There are instances where even that doesn't remedy the situation. As you can see now, the second time I try to call the same form, it no longer works again. There are situations where even a compact doesn't seem to resolve the issue, and you actually have to exit the database completely and then reinitialize the database for the form to start working again. So that's the bug. Now let's just see what's going on. How am I doing this? What is he talking about? How is he assigning things dynamically? This is not complicated. So I have a web browser control, like I say. You'll see there's no control source and there are no events. So nothing is going on with the web browser control. I purposely did that. I didn't want any extra code at this stage to be in the equation of potentially causing the issue. There's only one event going on at the form level, and it's the open event, on open. So let's take a look at it. In the on open, all I'm doing is I'm assigning a variable here, a string variable, with that same path with the prefix MS access here, as we saw in the two hard-coded versions, okay? And all I'm doing here is I'm telling it, take the Edge browser control and assign it that value. So all I'm doing in runtime is assigning the control source. I'm doing nothing else. And I'm passing the exact same file that we saw rendered on this guy here. Like I say, it will work normally after compact and repair the first time. But not always. As you've seen, here it did not. So the only way to solve that, for whatever reason, this time the compact and repair didn't solve the problem, is we have to exit and restart the database completely. Now we can launch it and it should render, and it does. But as soon as the user closes that form and then goes to reuse the form another time, it no longer renders. So it's an completely unacceptable user experience. You can't expect a user to open a form once and not need to reopen the form at a later point in time in their session. So that's the bug. What's the fix? Well, as you're going to see here, I have the exact same form. I've only made one small change. We're going to look at it in 2 seconds. But here you're going to see it opens every single time, and it will render it every single time. Okay? I can do this all day long as well. It will never fail. Or at least it's never failed for me. So what have I done? How did I finally fix this? Well, I've done all sorts of things over the past year. I've been butting my head on this problem and several other bugs with the modern web browser control for months and months and months here. So this wasn't my first go at it. And basically, initially, the workaround I had come up with originally was I used the timer event. So I'd set a delay of 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever. Basically, allow the form to fully load, and then run my code to update the control source. And with the timer event, I'd also then reset the timer to 0, so it wouldn't keep firing that over and over. The issue here is you're adding useless delays to form opening. The other issue is that you don't know each computer can have different speeds, can load forms at different speeds. So you can end up having a hard time finding what's the proper delay to be putting in place so it works for everyone, without adding too much of a delay that now my form takes 8 seconds to load because I have to wait 7 seconds for the web browser to load properly. So I did that. I also, similarly, talking about delays, I used the Sleep API for one of the versions. All of these worked, and they did remedy the situation. But like I say, we're adding delays, useless delays. Timer event is not something I privilege in any manner. I actually avoid it like the plague, just as much as using APIs. So Sleep API, these things worked, but they weren't the direction I like to take my code. So what did I come up with finally? Well, it's very simple. And as you're going to see here, there are no events on the web browser control, so nothing changed there. There are no new events on the form. So we still are only using the onOpen event. But we've had to add one little tidbit of code, and it's very simple. All I've done is add a do while loop. So I'm basically telling Access, just keep looping here until which state the web browser is in a ready state of complete. So basically fully loaded and ready to roll. So until that time, just keep looping. Do your events. Do whatever you're doing. Just keep looping. And once it's ready, now continue on and now assign the control source. So this proves, just the fact that this solved the problem, that internally there's some type of timing, massive timing issue between Access forms and Access modern web browser control. And there's a timing, there's a disconnect. They're allowing form open events to fire before the controls are fully ready, initialized. So it's entirely a bug. There's entirely an issue that should be resolved. But luckily for us, we can just do this, and up until now has remedied the situation completely. So it is really simple fix today. But let me tell you, it took a while to get to this point to figure this out. It's been hit or miss. There's also major headaches with developing any of this because, as I've noticed, you make changes and then you go and render your form and it doesn't work. And long story short is, until you close the database and reopen, sometimes some of the changes you put in place, even though they're hard-coded, they don't render. There's so many issues with the web browser control. It's pretty scary. But long story short is, just remember, when you're doing any development with web browser control, close your database frequently. And I know it's a pain in the butt, and it's a complete, utter waste of time. The amount of time wasted is insane. But it's the only way to guarantee that when you make a change that it will be properly reflected and that what you're seeing is what you've actually done. The number of times where I've done things, rendered it, it didn't work, and then I keep going about my coding, no, it didn't work, and then I have a crash because I've had the computer crash so many times with the web browser control, and then I reopen it and suddenly the code's working. I'm like, whoa, I did I didn't change anything and now it's working. Why didn't it work before? And it's all because I forgot to close the database to force it to flush, I guess, the cache, the memory. I'm not quite sure, but there's some major underlying issues beyond this whole control source. This also brings up another issue I just want to demonstrate. Now, remember here, this form wouldn't render, the control wouldn't render when I'm using a control source without the equal in the quotes. It just won't render anything. It doesn't work. Okay, we get nothing. And to make it render, we have to add that equal in the quotes to surround the path, right? Well, this doesn't seem to be the case in VBA. And I just wanted to illustrate here that you can include them or not. So let me demonstrate here. I'm going to comment this guy out. Let's just run this one first. So this is going to simply pass it the string value. There's no extra quotes. There's certainly no equal sign. And as you're going to see, let's close this and save our changes in our fixed version. It will render just fine. And it will render every single time. Okay? There we go. And if we choose not to use that version and we come to this version where we add the equal and we encapsulate it with the quotes, and now you'll see that it also renders just fine. No issue there. And it will render repetitively, no issue. So just once again, another disconnect between what you have to do when you're hard coding things through the property sheet. You have to have that equal. You have to have those quotes versus the reality of VBA where it seems to be optional. You pick and choose which version you want to use. Obviously, I highly recommend go with the simplified version and don't worry about all these quotations and equal and all this other crap. If you're able to get away with it, why not? Is it proper in my opinion? No. But yeah, if you're able to get away with just doing that, why not? Let's simplify our lives. I'm also going to just mention, I have a blog post about it too, but I was trying to do a routine to update all of my forms. So basically open a form, update the control source of a web browser control, save the form, go to the next form, over and over and over and over. And all I can tell you is it crashes every single time. So although we seem to be able to assign a control source here in real time, don't count on being able to do it if you're doing other advanced automation. It seems to bomb every single time. So that just brings us back to my article. I'm just going to end off very easily here. As you can see, this is traditionally what we do. It doesn't work, or doesn't work reliably, as you've seen. Renders maybe the first time if we're lucky. After that, it doesn't render. So the fix is this guy here. That's all. 3 easy lines, and at least now you can dynamically in real time use the form open event to reassign or assign your control source. Paying attention here, like I say with the VBA, you don't have to include that equal. Okay, it's not going to hurt anything, but you don't have to include it. And it just brings us to the point now, we've had the modern web browser control for over a year. Bugs abound. I'm just going to show you mine, but there are plenty more. These are the ones basically that I've reported. All sorts of issues. Like you'd think something like authorization of devices would be a top priority to be fixed. This has security implications. Still hasn't been remedied. There's all sorts of stuff here. Anyway, you can look at it. Some of my more recent ones. And yes, the dev team hasn't necessarily had a time to address them, but there's still, the fact that the click event doesn't work when you're using dynamic content, the fact that trying to assign a control source like this bug that we're talking about today These just demonstrate to what extent that the modern web browser control was released way too early. It was not properly vetted, it was not properly tested internally, and it just demonstrates how things are being just chucked out at users way before they should have been. And sadly, you'd expect when a new feature is released that it'd have priority for fixing. And that isn't the case, because we're seeing bugs, many of these here, a year old or more, that still haven't been addressed, don't even have a comment from the Access dev team. So, it's disheartening to see so many problems with a new feature to begin with, many of which should never have even made it out the front door from Redmond. Okay, users should never have seen today's bug. That should never, ever have existed. Just as much as, some things where there used to be, if there was a space in the path, they couldn't render it. Like, these are inexcusable mistakes. But beyond that, you'd expect a new feature to have priority. You'd expect that many of these bugs would have been addressed within a couple months at the most, let alone half a year, or now we're well past a year in, and nothing, not even a comment from the dev team. So it really makes you wonder, are we ever going to see these things, even something as simple as this, fixed? Is this just another doorstop that they've dropped in place? Here you go, you've got your modern web browser. We said we were going to give it to you. Here it is. Now leave us alone. It's more and more it's feeling that way. It's definitely not getting the attention it should. It's sad. It's sad because, once again, these was a feature that should have moved the product along, should have truly been another shining light, a feather in their cap, and it's turning into being a disaster. Outside of doing very basic stuff, it's turning out to be a disaster. Anyway, gonna stop here. At least you have a fix for this immediate issue. Will the dev team ever resolve it and we don't even need this? I have no clue. I'm not holding my breath. I don't hold my breath for much when it comes to that. That's why I spend countless hours smacking my head against Access, trying to figure out these things. And I know this seems bloody simple, but to get here sometimes it takes a long way around, convoluted, before getting to that. And like I said many times, I had tried things like this and it didn't work because I forgot to shut down Access and reinitialize the web browser control, which also demonstrates another bug. But anyway, we're going to stop here. You have a fix now. At least we can do dynamic control sources from the form itself. Don't try to do it through VBA routines like I demonstrated here. Doing things like this where you want to en masse update your entire database, all of the forms, opening, altering them, closing. Access crashes every single time. It just does not work. I've tried all sorts of variations here. I even tried assigning the control source, its own value. So forget altering it, just assigning it its own value, and even that will crash. So there is no excuse for this. It just shows once again that things were not properly tested. So I'm stopping here. It's gone on way long enough. You guys all have a great day. We'll see you in the next video. If you don't mind, like, share, subscribe, drop me comments. Your support is greatly appreciated. Have a wonderful day, everyone.